Meghan and Harry chose to turn their backs on the royal family in a way no one expected. A chaotic morning began when a series of private conversations were leaked verbatim to the American press. Words known only to the family suddenly became sensational headlines, spreading at lightning speed. Inside the palace, William watched these messages appear one after another, like blows to the family's honor. This was no longer a disagreement between him and his brother. It was an open war, and Meghan's side had fired the first shot. Without hesitation, William made what was considered the strongest decision in years, issuing a royal statement severing ties with Meghan, and he chose to release it at the break of dawn in London. At that time, America was still asleep, giving the royal family a golden 6-hour window to control public opinion before Meghan could respond. A cold, strategic move, leaving no room for emotion. William understood that if he did not act immediately, the story would spiral out of control. What surprised everyone even more was that Catherine stood beside him throughout that moment. She did not speak, nor did she react loudly, yet her gaze and silence carried a formidable weight. Many sources claim that it was Catherine who urged William to end everything, to close the chapter of being dragged into Meghan's whirlwind of drama. So what led William to make such a firm decision? And what role did Catherine truly play in this turning point? Let us explore the secrets behind the palace walls. In the deep chill of a London dawn, Kensington Palace seemed to hold its breath. Wind howled through the large windows, causing curtains to flutter, creating a rustling sound like a warning before a milestone that would change the Windsor family forever. In the study, only the warm yellow light reflected off the old wooden walls. William stood before the long desk, one hand resting on the wood, the other gripping his sleek black phone. The screen displayed the statement, awaiting the final approval to send, but his heart felt as heavy as stone. The night had dragged longer than he expected. He had not slept. Outside the window, London was still dark, the streets silent as if keeping secrets with him. He inhaled deeply and exhaled slowly, trying to maintain calm. Yet inside, waves of turmoil surged. Every story, every memory, every crack between him and Harry replayed like torn film strips. And then, Meghan's image turning her back to the media spotlight for the first time appeared vividly, as if it had happened yesterday. Behind her was Harry, holding her hand with resolve, as though their new life began the moment they left the monarchy. William saw it clearly, and that act of turning away had sparked it all. He had been more patient than anyone. He had hoped that one day Harry would return, still the little brother running around Sandringham, still the one who had hugged him and cried when their mother died. But the longer he waited, the further everything slipped away. That little brother disappeared, replaced by someone full of anger, speculation, and always ready to attack the family. And then, as Meghan's interviews continued to fuel the media fire, William knew he could no longer remain silent, not for his personal reputation, but for the survival of the monarchy he inherited, and for the loved ones who were being hurt day by day. In that room, William heard his own voice whisper softly, almost like a private vow. It was time to end it, or the family would continue to suffer. The words fell into the silent space, but their weight pressed deep into his heart. He picked up the phone and reopened the statement. Every word had been carefully considered, not harsh, not blaming, yet decisive. No room for ambiguity. This decision was not reactive. It was a strategic move, like a calculated attack through silence at the precise moment. William chose the London dawn to release the statement. At this hour, America was still asleep. Meghan could not counterattack. The American press could not respond immediately. He would have 6 golden hours. 6 hours to guide public opinion before the opposing wave surged. Some advisors called it a cold action, but William knew it was the only way to protect his family. The door opened softly. Catherine stepped in, unhurried, without a sound. Her hair fell gently over her shoulders, her gaze gentle, yet always seeing through what William tried to conceal. She stopped beside him and placed her hand on his back. Her silence was always the strongest support in moments like these. He turned to look deep into his wife's eyes. Catherine did not speak much. She only asked very softly, "Are you sure?" William nodded, but Catherine still looked at him for another second, as if reading all the pain inside. Then she replied gently, like the wind, "Then do what you believe is right." Those words pierced through the last trace of his hesitation. William unlocked his phone again. His finger hovered over the send button. For a moment, just a heartbeat. He closed his eyes. Images of Harry appeared, with his childhood smile, mischievous antics, summer hunts. Then other images intruded. Accusations, betrayal, tense phone calls, secrets leaking to the press as if whispered from dark corners. William opened his eyes. His gaze became cold and decisive. He pressed send. In that moment, everything seemed to stop. No fireworks, no cheering, only the wind rustling through the window frame. Yet it was the moment that closed a long chapter of the royal family. A decision in William's name, paid for with brotherhood. Catherine placed her hand gently on his shoulder. William said nothing, just stared out the window, where the London sky was beginning to lighten. A new era was crawling in, slowly but inevitably. And now the question for the audience is, if it were you, standing between family and duty, what would you choose to protect your family? But a decision never stands alone. Behind it were the files William had kept hidden for a long time, stacked neatly on the heavy wooden desk, yellow light casting long shadows across the hardcovers. He bent down, flipping through each file, feeling the coldness of the paper under his hands. Every page carefully recording Meghan's actions in the royal family, bullying staff, pressuring messages, sharp emails, and information leaked to the media. Each detail was recorded verbatim, with times, locations, and witnesses, forming an undeniable network of evidence. One file opened, and William saw the handwritten note of a former staff member who had witnessed tense meetings. She shouted at me, criticized every tiny detail, made me feel worthless. William frowned, but no anger flared. He knew every emotion had to be controlled. Each line, each testimony was a piece of a bigger picture, helping him fully understand Meghan's behavior and forming the basis for the decision he had long awaited. He turned to another file, recording messages leaked to the American press, copied word for word. William gripped the file cover, eyes following each line like reading a strategic plan. He recalled Meghan's media appearances, her controversial statements, edited conversations. And every time Harry tried to defend his wife, while that very act made other royal members feel attacked, he opened a smaller file where assistants recorded all of Meghan's actions and words with staff. Again, the words were clear. She checked my phone multiple times, forced me to redo work to her liking, and always threatened to report me if I did not comply. William felt his heartbeat rise, but he remained calm, inhaling deeply and exhaling slowly. He knew he could not let emotions control his decision. Catherine stood near the desk, eyes on the files, saying nothing. Her gaze was both gentle and firm, reminding William that he was acting not just for himself, but for the family and the institution they would continue to protect. She lightly placed her hand on his shoulder, and he felt silent but steadfast support. Catherine's presence was an anchor, reminding him that every decision had to be weighed carefully and carried weight. William closed his eyes, imagining the times Harry tried to persuade him to overlook Meghan's behavior, but each time his pain increased. These files were proof that his actions were not personal revenge, but to protect the family and the values they believed in. He opened his eyes, looking out the window where the dawn light first touched London. In that moment, he realized that every piece of paper, every piece of evidence, every testimony was a crucial part of the strategy. He returned to the files, opening notes from staff involved in palace events. They recounted Meghan's demands to change scripts, publicly criticizing staff in front of guests, and leaking information without informing superiors. William read each line, eyes scanning quickly but mind remembering every detail. Every action, every word was meticulously recorded, so he could use it as legal evidence to support the forthcoming decision. One special file recorded emails and messages between Meghan and the press. The conversations were copied word for word, every sentence, every semicolon. William took a deep breath, feeling the weight of each page, realizing that without these files, his decision could be questioned and criticized. But now everything was clear. He held all the evidence to stand firm, needing no explanation to anyone. He paused for a moment, placing his hand on the last file, silently reminding himself, this is not revenge, but protection of the family, protection of the institution. He knew that once the announcement was sent, all accusations would have no footing, and the truth would be on his side. He flipped through the notes one more time, reading every testimony, every behavioral detail, to ensure everything was accurate, without error. Even the smallest mistake could shake the entire decision, and he would not allow that to happen. Catherine stood still, her eyes still on him, like a silent contract between the two. William closed his eyes, feeling every breath, every heartbeat, then opened them again. He looked at the file in front of him, the morning light streaming through the window casting across each line, and he knew everything was ready. These files, the evidence, and his determination would form a solid foundation for the forthcoming decision. William took a deep breath, gripping each file, then placed them neatly on the desk. Each page seemed to whisper, everything is ready. No room for doubt. No room for mistakes. He knew that once he stepped out of this room, everything would change. And these secret files were the key, the guarantee, the strength to make the right decision, even if painful, even if costly. In that moment, William stood still, his gaze cast far, morning light spreading across the room, illuminating every page of the files, reminding him that all power comes from meticulous preparation, and every decision is based on the solid foundation he had built over the years. William stood by the heavy wooden desk, morning light streaming through the window onto each file, each piece of evidence he had kept for so long. But he could not make this decision alone, could not weigh every move without someone by his side, someone who was both ally and silent strategist. Catherine stood nearby, her face calm, eyes observing every movement, every expression. She said nothing, yet her presence made the room feel stiller, as if every breath, every step, was carefully measured. Catherine held a notebook, quietly recording every detail, how Meghan behaved with staff, tense glances, words cut and leaked to the press. Every action, every word was analyzed, placed into her logical system, so that when William needed it, all the data would be ready, accurate. The contrast between Catherine and Meghan was clear as day. Meghan was loud, public, stirring storms with every statement, every leak. Catherine was calm, silent, but every gesture, every note, was full of power. Like chess pieces, she moved with precision. Catherine stepped closer to her husband, whispering softly but firmly, "It's time to end it all, or everything will continue to be harmed." No further explanation was needed. Those three words carried weight, reminding William that this was not a personal decision, but one made by someone protecting family and institution. William looked at her, eyes flashing agreement, realizing that every next step would be based on careful, strategic, and meticulous preparation. Catherine continued to observe, record, analyze every staff member, every movement in the palace. She noted signs of worry, hesitation, fleeting glances, tentative gestures. Everything was logged, because even the smallest mistake could shake William's decision. Catherine was the one behind the scenes, but her power was evident in every silent action. She knew that her calmness was a weapon stronger than any shouting or noisy reaction. She flipped her notebook, comparing each detail with the files William held. Notes on Meghan were copied verbatim, from her behavior with staff to leaked messages to the press. Catherine observed William's eyes, seeing determination but also latent pain. She did not need to remind him, yet her presence was a silent source of strength, helping William maintain balance between emotion and reason. Catherine emphasized each detail by carefully noting it, every page of the notebook forming part of the overall strategy. When Meghan appeared in the media, Catherine did not react, did not make noise. But in her mind, every scenario was anticipated. She calculated each step, every potential reaction if William announced the decision, ensuring nothing went outside the plan. At one point, Catherine leaned toward her husband, whispering like a gentle breeze, "End it, William." The words were both an urging and a confirmation. This is the moment. This is the final decision. William nodded slightly, eyes solemn, realizing he was not alone in this step. Catherine ensured that the decision would be executed with optimal strategy, without encountering any obstacles. Catherine also observed every small behavior of Meghan. She noted how Meghan looked at staff, how she acted at royal events, every word that could cause trouble, every internal message at risk of leaking. Each detail was considered, analyzed, categorized, so William could fully grasp it before acting. Catherine understood that this meticulous preparation was the key to ensuring every decision was solid and lawful. In the silent moment, Catherine stood by the desk, still holding her notebook, her eyes following William as he flipped through each page of the files. Not a word was spoken, but every action of hers reminded William that he had to reach the final decision. She did not need to impose, did not need to shout, yet her power manifested through every note, every observation, every subtle assessment. Catherine also took notes on the moments Meghan appeared friendly, gentle, because she understood that even kindness could conceal risk. Every gesture was compared, cross-checked, analyzed, creating a complete strategic map. William looked at the pages and realized every step, every reaction, every possibility had been calculated. Once again, Catherine stepped closer, whispering softly, "It's time." William felt the silent but firm support, emphasizing that every action from now on would be based on careful strategy and preparation. Catherine's calmness stood in stark contrast to Meghan's noise, and it was this that made William recognize the true power of a silent strategy. In that moment, the palace was quiet. Morning light streamed through the windows, casting rays across each page of the files, reminding him that every decision was grounded in meticulous preparation. Catherine stood still, notebook in hand, her power evident, silent yet indispensable. William took a deep breath, gripping the files, his eyes looking far ahead, realizing that with Catherine by his side, every next step had been shaped, prepared, and ready for the inevitable decision. Catherine's final words, "It's time," still echoed in the office, like an invisible drum urging William to act. He looked at the files before him, hand clutching the phone, realizing that the next step would not only be a personal decision, but an unavoidable confrontation. Everything had been prepared, every scenario analyzed. Yet no one could replace the feeling of solitude when facing his brother, Harry, over a phone line stretching thousands of miles. This would be the fateful call, a moment where the fate of the royal family could change in just a few minutes. William pressed the call button, hearing the dial tone stretch, while his mind overflowed with thoughts and emotions accumulated over months. On the other end, Harry picked up in his home in America, Meghan sitting beside him, eyes anxious, lips pressed tight. Yet the geographical distance rendered any intervention almost powerless. Meghan could see her husband, but could not change the flow of the conversation, could not stop the words about to be spoken by William. The space across the phone line became so tense, it felt as if it could be sliced with a knife. William spoke first, calm but sharp. "Harry, it's time we speak honestly. There's no other way." With a heavy sigh, he continued, each word slicing through the atmosphere. "No, it's because of you. You have changed." The words echoed like a sentence without explanation. It did not only accuse Meghan, but targeted Harry directly. Once considered the victim, now an accomplice in actions against the family. Harry remained silent. He could not respond immediately, feeling powerless, isolated, and overwhelmed by disappointment. Meghan looked at her husband, wanting to speak, but knowing any intervention now would be useless. The tense stares, forced smiles, and oppressive silence created a suffocating space, where all emotions were restrained yet charged with potential for explosion. In William's mind, every memory and frustration blended together. He thought of the times Harry had sided with Meghan, of leaks to the press, of actions he felt were betrayals, and now he had to speak clearly, face the truth without evasion. "You have changed" was not just an accusation. It was a cold assessment that Harry was no longer a victim, but had become a partner in the problem. This was a turning point, a warning that all consequences from now on would be theirs to bear. Harry listened, unable to respond, feeling the pressure build with every passing minute. He realized that geographical distance could not hide the truth. Meghan might be in America, but William's decisions, reactions, and strategy dictated everything. Harry felt isolated, trapped in a web of strategy he had never prepared for. He looked at Meghan as if pleading for support, but Meghan could only remain silent, acknowledging that everything had gone beyond control. The feeling intensified as William continued, his voice calm but uncompromising, each word like a knife cutting through distance and ambiguity. "We have no other choice. I must protect the family, protect the institution. Every next action must follow strategy, and you have become part of the problem." Each word carried a cold calm but also deep pain, for William knew he was losing his brother, losing a part of the family he had cherished since childhood. Harry remained silent, no reply coming. In the room in America, Meghan only watched her husband, feeling the isolation, tension, and pressure they faced. Every connection, every influence before had now been blocked by William's strategic decision. This was no longer just a fraternal relationship. It was a lesson in power, discipline, and the consequences that betrayal could bring. William lowered his voice, still calm, yet sadness seeped into every word. "I do not take pleasure in doing this, but if we do not end it here, everything will continue to be harmed. This is the last time I speak plainly to you, and I hope you understand." He set the phone down for a few seconds, as if to reaffirm his resolve, taking a deep breath to steady himself. Feelings of loss, disappointment, and responsibility intertwined, but determination prevailed. Harry remained silent, but in his mind, every action, every reaction of the royal family was now clear. He realized William was not acting out of emotion. This was strategy, a calculated and responsible move. Meghan beside him, although wanting to intervene, had to acknowledge that it was too late to change the course of events. The call ended, but its echo still lingered. William set the phone down, looking out the window, realizing that the era of iron discipline had begun. Harry and Meghan now stood at the other end of the line, isolated, powerless, while William and Catherine had prepared every next step, from secret files and media strategy to legal responses if necessary. In that moment, the palace was silent, morning light reflecting off the files and desk, creating a scene both calm and intensely tense. William sighed, knowing that every action from now on would be purely strategic, and any resistance or leaks from Harry and Meghan had already been anticipated. He emphasized once more that this was a game of power and responsibility, leaving no room for fleeting emotions. Thus, from this call, a chain of consequences began. Harry became isolated. Meghan stood apart, and William, together with Catherine, entered the next decisive stage. Everything had been laid out in the files, through silent observation and carefully prepared strategy, and now it was time for them to prove that power, discipline, and preparation could change the fate of a royal family. The call between William and Harry ended, but its echo still resonated in the palace like an indelible drumbeat. William set the phone down, hands trembling but eyes resolute, looking out the window where morning light fell on each page of the files. He knew that every move from now had to be carefully considered. Even a small mistake could cause the royal family to lose the power and prestige they had maintained for centuries. In that moment, across the ocean, Meghan began to kindle a counterattack. Meghan was no longer passive, no longer the one affected by strategic decisions. From her large home in America, she knew that the only way to seize initiative was to leak information. Private conversations between Harry, her, and William, every word carefully selected, were released to American newspapers. The articles appeared with astonishing accuracy, quoting every sentence verbatim, making anyone reading feel as if they were eavesdropping on royal life itself. William and his close associates received this information like a shock. In his mind, the scenes immediately appeared: closed meetings, moments once thought private now exposed, every sensitive detail, every potentially misleading remark becoming a weapon against him and the royal family. The sense of being watched, secretly recorded, created immense pressure, forcing every plan and strategy to be reconsidered. In the palace, William emphasized every detail to Catherine. His gaze hardened, showing both disappointment and determination. Catherine simply stood by, calm as ever, noting every development, analyzing the leaked information, and assessing its impact on the royal family's reputation. Her composure contrasted sharply with Meghan's noise. And it was this caution that helped William avoid letting emotion influence his decisions. As the American articles appeared, public reaction erupted immediately. Social media flooded with comments about cracks in the royal family. Stories once private, now public topics. William felt intense pressure, but he also knew that responding hastily or emotionally would only complicate matters further. This was the moment to act strategically, not emotionally. For this reason, William decided to enter the lockdown phase. He completely stopped answering Harry's calls, minimized all direct contact, and required all communication requests to go through lawyers. Every message, email, and call was controlled and documented for legal records, ensuring that no further leaks could occur. This was not cold or hateful. It was a strategic step to protect the family and the monarchy from external threats. Harry and Meghan now stood at the other end of the line, isolated, powerless, witnessing William's plan but unable to stop it. Meghan understood that every action from now would be tightly controlled, that there was no longer any opportunity to manipulate information as before. The feeling of being blocked, watched, and losing initiative made her realize that William's strategy had successfully reestablished authority. William sat down, still holding the files, eyes looking into the distance where sunlight shone through the window. He knew that every action from now on had to be executed with absolute discipline, every decision based on files, analysis, and long-prepared strategy. Meghan's counterattack did not shake him. On the contrary, it confirmed that the lockdown move was necessary, and that accepting the loss of his brother was the price to protect the family and the monarchy. In the room, Catherine observed, took notes, and analyzed every detail. She understood that the lockdown decision was not only a security measure, but also a crucial strategic step, controlling every reaction from Harry and Meghan. Her calmness contrasted completely with the noise and shocks from the press, and it helped William maintain focus and make the right decisions. The scene in America was equally tense. Meghan watched her husband, eyes anxious, lips pressed tight, realizing that all previous plans had now been disrupted. Harry, silent, felt the pressure, isolation, and loss of control. They were in the midst of an information battle they could not win, with every move already within the strategy laid out by William and Catherine. The lockdown was implemented strictly. All communication had to go through lawyers, all incoming and outgoing information was controlled, and any leak would be immediately dealt with according to regulations. This was the moment William accepted losing his brother while simultaneously protecting the family, the monarchy, and royal power. Every move was calculated, leaving no room for emotional influence, no room for impulsive actions. Thus, from Meghan's counterattack, William made the lockdown decision, a decisive, strategic, and deeply emotional move. This was a moment that defined a new era in the monarchy. Discipline, strategy, and power were prioritized. While personal emotions had to yield to responsibility, Meghan was isolated, Harry lost initiative, and William, together with Catherine, stood firm, protecting the family from looming threats, proving that in the royal family, power is never left unchecked. In the palace world, where every action is scrutinized, every word can become a weapon, we witness a reality. Power never comes randomly, and no one can stand outside difficult decisions. William, under all pressure, betrayal, and complex relationships, was forced to choose a path few would want, sacrificing the brotherly bond to protect the survival of the monarchy. This was not an easy choice, nor a decision formed in a moment of emotion. It was the result of calculation, strategy, and a pain that only those in power could truly understand. What makes this story remarkable is not just the tense calls, the secret files, or the information counterattacks, but how power operates in silence, with decisions that the outside world can hardly fully grasp. Looking at William and Catherine's actions, we see an important lesson. Calmness, observation, and silent strategy can sometimes be stronger than any shout or noisy reaction. Catherine, in her silent yet decisive role, shows that true power does not need to be flaunted. Sometimes it simply exists in preparation, patience, and the ability to prompt others to act at the right moment. This story also raises a difficult question. In the process of protecting power, do people lose their inner humanity? William had to freeze his relationship with his brother, limit contact, even accept isolating Harry and Meghan. These actions were strategic, but at the same time made outsiders inevitably feel cold and distant. This is a lesson about the cost of power. To preserve the survival of the monarchy, sometimes you must pay with feelings, with close bonds, even with brotherly love. Yet from another perspective, these choices also affirm the responsibility and courage of the leader. William did not avoid difficult decisions. He did not let personal emotions dictate his actions, and he was willing to endure loneliness to protect greater values, family, the monarchy, and the traditions he inherited. This is a lesson that anyone facing power, responsibility, or leadership can learn. Difficult decisions are sometimes the only right ones, even if the heart must endure. The story of Meghan and Harry is also a reminder of the power of information in public opinion. A small action, a private word, if exposed to the world, can completely change the game. This reminds us that in the modern era, power relies not only on position or tradition, but also on information strategy, situational control, and anticipating others' reactions. What happens in the British royal family is not just personal conflict, but a vivid lesson in how power operates among people, information, and strategy. From another angle, this story highlights sacrifice and responsibility. Not everyone can understand the feeling of cutting off a close relationship to protect something greater. When William decided to halt contact, enforce the lockdown, and ensure all communication went through lawyers, he was not only protecting the family, but also creating a new standard for the monarchy. Discipline, strategy, and absolute preparation. This marked a shift from flexibility, balanced by emotion, to an iron discipline system, where every decision is calculated and power is never left unchecked. But the story is not just for the royal family. It serves as a reminder to us of the value of preparation, observation, and strategy in any area of life, whether in family, work, or society. Sometimes you must make decisions no one wants, but if viewed from a distance, it is the only way to protect greater values. At this point, the audience is invited to reflect. How many of our daily decisions are strategic, and how many are driven by emotion? How many truly protect real value, and how many sacrifice the humanity within? Finally, the story is an invitation for the audience to discuss and share perspectives. You can put yourself in the position of William, Catherine, Harry, or Meghan, and ask, what would you do? Is absolute decisiveness always the only way to protect family and power? Or can it also cause us to lose the most precious things, trust, bonds, and humanity? There is no easy answer, but the very act of inviting the audience to reflect, debate, and imagine themselves in each choice makes the story vivid, profound, and unforgettable. Thus, the echo of the story is not only about the relationships between William, Harry, Meghan, and Catherine, but also a lesson in power, responsibility, and the cost of unavoidable decisions. It reminds us that in the world of power, silence, observation, strategy, and the ability to sacrifice can sometimes be stronger than any words or actions. Is this decisiveness the only way to protect the royal family? Or does it also sacrifice the humanity within? This is an open question for the audience to answer, comment on, and debate. In that moment, the palace story is no longer just an event, but a living lesson in power, strategy, and the difficult choices anyone in a position of authority must face.